China's salami slicing, it does have very real impact on Taiwan. And you see the same strategy being used against Taiwan, how China has been now conducting like these military drills very close to Taiwan, kind of normalizing it.
Also what's happening with now, like the outlying islands like Jingmen,
Yeah.
Penghu, Matsu, where it's kind of like they're increasing these Chinese Coast Guard patrols in the area.
They boarded that Taiwanese like tour boat.
Yes. I mean, it's obviously trying to intimidate and freak people out.
Taiwan should have said they were all scientists.
I mean, I'm not sure that would have stopped the Chinese government from boarding.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, though, you know, what's interesting is that when we went to Jinmen in 2018, like, you know, there's a lot of pro-China or pro-Beijing kind of sentiment there.
I mean, they are right next to China.
Right.
You can see it.
They're like right off the coast of Xiamen. Yeah, I mean, we stood on the beach and like you could see mainland right across the water. It's like 2 miles away.
Yeah, there's like this hazy red and low hum that would penetrate your brain.
And there was like an eye on fire in the distance.
Something deep from the sea.
Yeah, I mean, but I think like when the CCP does things like board a tourist boat or have an extreme reaction to something Taiwan does legitimately, it makes people in Taiwan, instead of being scared of the CCP, they just get angry.
I think that's true for people on the mainland Taiwan island. I don't know how people on Jinmen are reacting to this, actually.
Yeah, well, I would be angry. And it seems that the U.S. has actually responded to this, or if not responded directly to this incident, has done something that has that same impact, which is putting U.S. troops on Jinmen.
Oh, I think the U.S. troops are already there.
Right. That's why I don't know the timeline. But it pushes back against the CCP.
I think but the fact that the news that there are U.S. Green Berets on these outlying islands like Jingmen and Penghu training Taiwanese military, like that, you know, leak or whatever I think that is the response.
Right. It's clearly calculated. And I think, you know, obviously this angers China. But what it does is that the more you put U.S. troops in different areas of Taiwan, the riskier it becomes for the CCP to invade. Because if they try to invade Taiwan and U.S. troops are killed, then the U.S. government politically, no matter which administration it is going to politically have no choice but to get involved. Or at least it gives them an excuse to get involved. Whereas if there's no American casualties, there will be people in Congress who say, oh, you know, we really don't want to go to another war, and they can delay it. Even if they delay it 3 days, that's too long, right? The response has to happen immediately. And so every single additional troop stationed in Taiwan reduces the likelihood of the CCP invading Taiwan.
I mean, I think, yes, that's obviously a warning, right? Just letting it be known that there are U.S. troops on these outlying islands makes it harder for the CCP to be like, oh, well, let's just take Jingmen and see what happens.
Right.
You know, maybe we can slice off this section of the salami and, you know, Taiwan won't be able to do anything. The U.S. won't be able to do anything.
Just smooth the map a little bit to encompass all of Taiwan.
I mean, first you want to start with Jingmen and, like, you know, like some of the outlying islands.
The uninhabited ones.
Yeah.
Well, Jingmen's inhabited.
Yeah, but like then you slowly, go for Taiwan, right. The entire salami.
I mean, most of China's new territorial claims in the last 2 decades have been uninhabited areas that they then put people onto, right? Like the South China Sea, those islands that they claimed were not even really islands at the time. They were just reefs, right? And they make them, there was no one living there. They make them into islands and then put people there to sort of colonize them, right? Similar with like the part of Russia they first claimed was like this little island in a river, which is like, oh, no big deal, right? Or like a lot of the border with India, I mean, outside of the military station there, like people aren't really living there because it's just it's like a
brutal and high in the
high altitude, cold, yeah. So, you kind of start with those things and you gauge the pushback. Obviously, Taiwan's a whole another animal because there's like millions of people living in Taiwan. And that's, there's going to be loss of life. And then the pushback becomes really real.
Yeah, the Indian border is a good example of how the salami slicing works. There's like this kind of nebulous border in like a very hostile environment. So China builds its, little outpost a little closer to the India side, a little further, a little further, a little further, stuff
Or
in
they're
Bhutan.
building roads and things like that in the last 5 or 6 years. I
To
think there
get
was
people there quickly.
also they basically took over some parts of Nepal
Yeah.
by just like building a few villages like right over the border
Yeah.
and like moving people there and then slowly kind of encroaching on. And then Nepal is also pretty dependent on the CCP. I don't know if this is still the case, but for many years they had a communist government, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
so they're not going to say anything, right? Because they depend so much on the CCP for trade and for all these things. So just slowly they can take over that territory.
Right. At least, I give props to the Indian government for pushing back, which they've done in a lot of ways. But the latest thing is they've built this high altitude tunnel that leads up to the part of the border area, which is in itself, a tremendous feat of technology, but also, science and wizardry combined. But this tunnel also will allow them to transport troops and supplies in, even if there's difficult weather conditions.
Which, of course, means that the Chinese Communist Party is very upset that India is encroaching upon Chinese territory in Arunachal Pradesh with, their tunnel.
Right.
How dare they?
How dare India do its own economic development?
But this is how you use the tactics against them, because like if you start to salami slice China, they are in the same situation of like, okay, what really are we going to do to push back against this Indian tunnel? Nothing.
Yeah.
Especially because didn't the U.S. like acknowledge that the Arunachal Pradesh belongs to India? After this
The
tunnel?
U.S. State Department released a statement that said that the U.S. supports India and that Arunachal Pradesh is a Indian territory.
And considering like I'm not a huge fan of the State Department, like that's still.
I also What's interesting then is of course China's foreign ministry was very upset about it. So all the news articles I saw were kind of the framing was that China gets angry over the U.S. interfering.
China slams.
Yeah, the U.S. interference in its border dispute with India. I mean, whereas the U.S. was just kind of just stating the U.S. policy, which has always been the U.S. policy, that they recognize this as Indian territory. It's not like they're doing something new,
Mhm.
right? But yeah, the framing of it is always like, oh, well,
It angers China.
yeah.